Most people believe wars are decided on the battlefield by tanks, missiles, aircraft, and soldiers. But history shows something far more uncomfortable. Wars are often decided thousands of miles away from the front lines. Inside parliaments, inside election cycles, inside political systems that determine how long a country is willing to fight. Because in modern war, the battlefield does not exist in isolation. It is controlled by domestic politics. Wars appear to be decided by weapons. Missiles destroy targets. Aircraft dominate the skies. Armies capture territory. From the outside, war looks like a purely military contest. But this view is incomplete. Because the battlefield is only one layer of war, behind every battlefield is a political system, and that political system determines how the war is fought, how long it is fought, and whether it continues at all. This is why domestic politics often shapes battlefield outcomes more than military capability, because war is not simply a military activity, it is a political act. Nowhere is this more visible than in democratic societies. Democracies must maintain public support for war. Political leaders must answer to voters. Media coverage influences public perception. Election cycles create pressure for quick results. All of these factors shape military strategy, and sometimes they limit what the military can actually do. But here's where it gets interesting. Domestic politics does not just constrain war. Sometimes it determines whether a country can sustain a war at all. Military power means very little if the political system cannot support it. And history provides many examples of this reality. One of the most famous is the Vietnam War. The United States had overwhelming military superiority. American aircraft dominated the skies. American firepower vastly exceeded that of North Vietnam. But the outcome of the war was shaped heavily by domestic political pressure. As the war continued, public support in the United States began to decline. Television coverage brought images of the war directly into American homes. Protests spread across major cities. Political leaders faced increasing pressure to reduce American involvement. Military commanders requested additional forces and expanded operations, but political leaders were reluctant to escalate the war further. Eventually, domestic political pressure forced a gradual withdrawal of U.S. forces. The military situation on the battlefield became secondary to the political situation at home. And this is not an isolated case. Domestic politics has influenced countless conflicts throughout history. Consider World War I. By 1917, several European countries were nearing collapse. Years of brutal trench warfare had drained national resources. Casualties were staggering. In Russia, domestic political instability led to the Russian Revolution. The new Bolshevik government withdrew Russia from the war entirely. This dramatically altered the strategic balance on the Eastern Front. And it happened not because of battlefield defeat alone, but because of internal political upheaval. Now here's the part most analysts get wrong. Domestic politics does not only influence whether wars end, it also shapes how wars begin. Political leaders often make decisions about war based on domestic incentives, public opinion, election cycles, economic pressures, national prestige. These factors can influence strategic decisions long before the first shot is fired. Sometimes leaders initiate military action to strengthen political support. Sometimes they avoid military action because the domestic cost would be too high. And sometimes they escalate conflicts to demonstrate strength to their own population. Domestic politics becomes intertwined with strategic decision-making. This relationship creates complex incentives. Military commanders focus on battlefield objectives, but political leaders must balance those objectives with domestic consequences. Nowhere is this tension more visible than in limited wars. Limited wars are conflicts where political leaders deliberately restrict military operations. They limit targets, they limit troop deployments, they limit escalation. These limitations often frustrate military commanders, because, from a purely military perspective, greater force might produce faster results. But political leaders must consider broader risks. Escalation might provoke international backlash. It might increase civilian casualties. It might damage political support at home. So the war is fought within political boundaries. But here's where it gets dangerous. Domestic politics can also distort strategic thinking. Political leaders may prioritize short-term political gains over long-term military success. They may demand rapid victories that are unrealistic. They may underestimate the cost of prolonged conflict, or they may delay difficult decisions because of political consequences. These distortions can shape military strategy in ways that undermine operational effectiveness. Now, consider modern conflicts. Today's wars are fought in an environment dominated by information. Social media spreads images instantly. News coverage influences public opinion in real time. Political narratives compete with battlefield realities. Governments must constantly manage the political dimension of war. Public perception becomes a strategic factor because public support determines whether a government can continue fighting. This is why information warfare has become so important. Adversaries attempt to influence domestic audiences. They spread propaganda. They amplify political divisions. They exploit controversial events. Their goal is not only to weaken military forces, their goal is to weaken political support for the war itself. If domestic political support collapses, the war effort becomes unsustainable. And this can happen even when the military situation is favorable. Now, here's the part that changes everything. Authoritarian regimes face different domestic pressures. They often control media narratives. They suppress dissent. They limit public opposition. This allows them to sustain wars longer under certain conditions. But authoritarian systems have their own vulnerabilities. If military failures become severe enough, they can trigger political instability. Elite factions may challenge leadership. Economic strain may create internal pressure. Public dissatisfaction may eventually erupt. So domestic politics shapes warfare in both democratic and authoritarian systems. It simply operates through different mechanisms, but the underlying principle remains the same. War is ultimately a political act. Military force serves political objectives, and those political objectives are defined within domestic political systems. This means that understanding war requires more than studying weapons and tactics. It requires understanding political systems, public opinion, economic resilience, institutional stability. All of these factors determine how long a country can fight and how much it is willing to sacrifice. Now consider modern strategic competition. Major powers today are preparing for potential conflicts that could last years. But sustaining a long war requires more than military strength. It requires political endurance. A country must maintain public support. Its economy must sustain wartime production. Its political leadership must maintain legitimacy. If any of these elements collapse, military power becomes irrelevant. Because wars are not won only on the battlefield. They are won when one side's political system can endure longer than the other. This is why domestic politics is not separate from military strategy. It is part of it, and the countries that understand this relationship have a major advantage, because they prepare not only their armies, they prepare their societies. They strengthen economic resilience. They manage political expectations. They build public understanding of the conflict. In the end, the battlefield may determine tactical victories. But domestic politics often determines strategic outcomes. And in modern warfare, the fight for public support may be just as important as the fight for territory.